tea, morning tea, morning tea. That's my song today. I'm actually feeling kind of sad. It is Friday, May 29th, and it feels like the world is burning. So I had thought, oh, I'll do something, say something, share something a little bit light to lift moods. I was going to do a show and tell of some art in my house. And then a friend of mine posted an article, which if you will just bear with me, I'm going to bring up. It's from the New York Times. It is an opinion, so it's an editorial. And but I think it's important. So I'm just going to read it. I know that not everybody has access to the New York Times. So this was written on May 25th, 2020, by Sabrina Strings, who is Dr. Strings is an associate professor of sociology at the University of California at Irvine. And I'll tell you the book that she wrote that was a little bit of the genesis of this after I read the article. So this is Sabrina speaking. About 5 years ago, I was invited to sit in on a meeting about health in the African American community. Several important figures in the fields of public health and economics were present. A freshly minted PhD, I felt strangely like an interloper. I was also the only Black person in the room. One of the facilitators introduced me to the other participants and said something to the effect of, Sabrina, what do you think? Why are Black people sick? Why are Black people sick? I was asked a question in earnest. Some of the experts had devoted their entire careers to addressing questions surrounding racial health inequality. Years of research, and in some institutes, failed interventions had left them baffled. Why are Black people so sick? My answer was swift and unequivocal: slavery. Let me repeat. The only Black person in the room, sociologist. Her answer to the question of why are Black people so sick, one word: slavery. Back to the article. My colleagues looked befuddled as they tried to come to terms with my reply. I meant what I said. The era of slavery was when white Americans determined that Black Americans needed only the bare necessity, not enough to keep them optimally safe and healthy. It set in motion Black people's dismissed access to healthy foods, safe working conditions, medical treatments, and a host of other social inequalities that negatively impact health. This message is particularly important in a moment when African Americans have experienced the highest rate of severe complications and death from coronavirus, and obesity has surfaced as an explanation. The cultural narrative that Black people's weight is a harbinger of disease and death has long served as a dangerous distraction from the real sources of inequality, and it's happening again. Reliable data are hard to come by, but available analysis shows that on average, the rate of Black fatalities is 2.4 times that of whites with COVID-19. This includes Michigan, Kansas, Wisconsin, and in Washington, D.C., that ratio jumps to 5 to 7 Black people dying of COVID-19 complications for every one white death. This is now me speaking, Katie. So to repeat, 2.4 times the number of Black people are dying of COVID-19. And in Washington, D.C., the seat of our country, the ratio jumps to 5 to 7 Black people dying for every one white person. back to this opinion piece. Despite the lack of clarity surrounding these findings, one interpretation of these disparities that has gained traction is the idea that Black people are unduly obese, currently defined as a body mass index greater than 30, which is seen as a driver of other chronic illnesses and is believed to put Black people at higher risk for serious complications from COVID-19. These claims have received intense media attention despite the fact that scientists haven't been able to sufficiently explain the link between obesity and COVID-19. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, 42.2% of white Americans and 49.6% of African Americans are obese. Researchers have yet to clarify how a 7% disparity in obese prevalence translates to a 240% to 700% disparity in fatalities. This is me speaking again, so let's take that in, shall we? Researchers have yet to clarify how a 7% disparity in obesity prevalence translates to 240 to 700% disparity in fatalities. Back to this article, and this is coming to a close here. Experts have raised questions about the rush to implicate obesity, and especially severe obesity, as a factor in coronavirus complications. An article in the medical journal The Lancet evaluated Britain's inclusion of obesity as a risk factor coronavirus complications and reported, to date, no available data shows adverse COVID-19 outcomes specifically in people with a BMI of 40. The authors concluded, the scarcity of information regarding the increased risk of illness for people with a BMI higher than 40 has led to ambiguity and might increase anxiety, given that these individuals have now been categorized as vulnerable to severe illness if they contract COVID-19. And so now this is me speaking again. If you remember some of the horrendous decisions that healthcare providers, doctors in Italy had to make when Italy's hospitals were completely overrun. And these are deep ethical questions. Deep. Who gets care and who does not get care? So now here we are in America. Stuff's happening. We don't know how these waves are going to go. And doctors might have to make some decisions about who gets care and who does not get care. Well, you can't put it aside. Brown and Black bodies receive shit health care attention in America. If Brown and Black bodies are showing up in hospitals at a higher rate than white bodies and are overweight, it's a kind of a two-step extrapolation that these people may be denied care. Maybe, I'm not saying they will, but they might be in a context of overwhelm at the hospital. Okay, back to the article. Excuse me. Promoting strained associations between race, body size, and complications from this little understood disease has served to reinforce an image of Black people as wholly swept up in sensuous pleasures like eating and drinking, which supposedly makes our unruly bodies repositories for preventable weight-related illnesses. The attitudes I see today have echoes of what I described in Fearing the Black Body, the racial origins of fat phobia. My research showed that anti-fat attitudes originated not with medical findings, but with Enlightenment era belief that overfeeding and fatness were evidence of savagery and racial inferiority. Today, the stakes of these discussions could not be higher. When I learned about these guidelines suggesting that doctors may use existing health conditions, including obesity, to deny or limit eligibility to life-saving coronavirus treatments, I couldn't help but thinking of slavery-era debates I've studied about whether or not so-called constitutionally weak African Americans should receive medical care. Fortunately, since I attended that event 5 years ago, experts focused on the health of African Americans have continued to work to direct the nation's attention away from individual level factors. The New York Times 1619 project featured essays detailing how the legacy of slavery impacted health and healthcare for African Americans, and explaining how, since the era of slavery, Black people's bodies have been labeled congenitally diseased and undeserving of access to life-saving treatments. In a recent essay addressing COVID-19 specifically, Rashawn Ray underscored the legacy of redlining that the legacy of redlining that pushed Black people back into poor, densely populated communities, often with limited access to healthcare. And he pointed out that Black people are overrepresented in service positions as essential workers who have greater exposure than those with the luxury of sheltering in place. Ibram X. Kendi has written that the irresponsible behavior of disproportionately poor people of color, often cited as an important factor in health disparities, is a scapegoat directing America's attention from the centrality of systemic racism and current health inequalities. Evaluating the inadequate and questionable data about race, weight, and COVID-19 complications with these insights in mind makes it clear that obesity and its affiliated, if incorrect, implication of poor lifestyle choices should not be front and center when it comes to understanding how this pandemic has affected African Americans, even before COVID-19. Black Americans had higher rates of multiple chronic illnesses and a lower life expectancy than white Americans, regardless of weight. This is an indication that our social structures are failing us. These failings and the accompanying embrace of the belief that Black bodies are uniquely flawed are rooted in a shameful era of American history that took place hundreds of years before this pandemic. And again, this was written by Dr. Sabrina Springs, who's an associate professor of sociology at the University of California at Irvine. And the book she is Fearing the Black Body, the Racial Origins of Fat Phobia. So I leave you with this. The person who shared this article, we were born on the same day, in the same year, June 17, 1969, and she's Black and I'm white. And because she lives in a Black body, that changes our life expectancies, even though we were born on the same day, in the same year. So I thank you for sticking along with this. I will put a link to this opinion piece in the description of the video. And let's all just be aware, okay? Systemic oppression. Jim Crow wasn't that long ago. All right, be well. Have a good day if you can, and I will see you later. Bye.